I'm Alan Harnett. I'm the director of Virginia Clean Cities. We're a statewide coalition working on a whole wide range of technologies, but covering more than 40,000 square miles of cities and counties and private businesses. And so we work with state and local governments and private sector firms to reduce emissions. And we're here today with a range of guests and stakeholders, but we're also showcasing some pretty exciting technology. I want to thank everybody for being here. At any time, please unmute and chime in. And Andrew, please feel free as you're going to go slow and leave plenty of space for talking. We are really pleased today to be working on an exciting piece of technology with Blink charging. And as you can guess, this is an electric vehicle charging technology. I'm really excited about this, firstly, because the technology is forward thinking. It is chargers that are deployed at low cost, but at a charging speed of 19.2 kilowatts, which means the charging speed is about maybe 8 times faster than the initial electric vehicle chargers that went out there with my first generation Nissan Leaf or the first generation Chevy Volt. The chargers at 19.2 kilowatts in an hour provide, like 80 miles of charge in a single hour. And that's a very adequate amount of electricity. And what's exciting to me is that we have a project where we've secured federal funding that would pay for essentially what should be most or all of the installation. And Blink is providing chargers. And so there is a potential to get a free electric vehicle charger, which is to say that the funding would come from the federal government on a reimbursement basis that would be directly in line with completing projects. In my mind, in my dreams, we will complete 200 electric vehicle chargers that are 19.2 kilowatts with this project, and then also be able to accomplish many, many more with either installation cost savings or with other people who can pony up just a little bit to get through these installs. These are networked chargers, but it's really exciting. And then as Andy was mentioning, and as others were mentioning, the heavy duty vehicles will likely charge at speeds closer to 19.2 kilowatts. So they'll be likely to be pulling more power. So electric vehicles are part of a portfolio of technologies that can reduce emissions, that can reduce the amount of transportation air quality challenges that are created with the 50 million metric tons of CO2. And so we really should all be working to find solutions that are affordable and effective. And here's one that is, I think, a winner. So I do want to recognize the final person. Be sure Andy gets to introduce himself as well, and then pass this over to Andy. After you've introduced yourself, please presentate, my friend.
All right. Well, Alan, man, you couldn't ask for a better introduction than that. It's probably the best $20 I've spent this week. So I appreciate that. Check's in the mail, my friend. So I am Andrew Hillman, the Executive Sales Manager with Blink Charging. I am based here in Chesapeake, Virginia, the beautiful southern part of the state, which is also gasoline challenged at the moment. But I did see today that the lines have dropped down quite a bit. So, but I have to say I was a little bit like the electric car superhero driving my Leaf the other night to CVS, going past the gas stations. Yeah, I kept it, I don't try to get too smug. So, but it did make you feel good to have I have a 2018 Nissan Leaf, and we use that car constantly, and we are just tickled to death with what a wonderful way it is to get around. We have an SUV that's large enough to hold our whole family, all 5 of us, but we keep that parked and use it really just for long trips, maybe from here to DC or something like that. But most of the time, honestly, it sits in the garage. So I'm an EV driver and very happy to be here today presenting about Blink to all of you. So I'm going to let Sarah start it off with this wonderful show that we've put together. Not my BMW i3, but I think it looks good plugged into the Blink charger. So I like that very much. As Alan mentioned, we're going to be focusing on Blink and the 19.2 kilowatt EV charging solutions that we offer. Tell you a little bit more about that, and definitely be taking some of your questions about the Blink technology. So Sarah, I'll let you go on to the next one. We had to throw in some shots of some happy EV drivers here, and that's how I actually started my foray into electric vehicles, was with a second generation Chevrolet Volt. So I call that dipping my little toe in the electric car water. And once I got a taste of how fun it was to drive electric, I wanted to go all electric. But that was my Chevrolet Volt was my transition into all electric vehicles. So have fond memories of that car. Okay, Sarah, go ahead. This slide we threw in just to give you a little more information that it's like preaching to the choir with the audience we have here, but this is just something we share with prospective hosts that talks about EV sales volume and just the tremendous increase that we're seeing in the number of electric vehicles on the road and on offer from manufacturers. We are tickled to death to see how many new EVs are coming out. Myself, I couldn't help. I was driving by the Volkswagen dealer the other day, and they had a shiny ID4 parked out front. I had to stop in and check it out. So the more EVs that are getting on the road, the better, and also the more capable they are. As Alan mentioned, my Nissan Leaf charges at 6.8 kilowatts, but the Volkswagen ID4 is 11 kilowatts on level 2 charging, and many of the new vehicles are now 19.2 kilowatts, such as the Cadillac Lyriq and the Audi e-tron. All right, Sarah, go ahead. And this next slide just talks about the demand for EV infrastructure, how that's growing rapidly. And we're very happy at Blink to be working with Alan and the Virginia Clean Cities team on the Mid-Atlantic Electrification Project. We've had an overwhelmingly positive response to that program. I myself have signed up a number of future hosts, and we had a great call with Virginia Clean Cities yesterday with Matt Wade to go over some of the environmental documents that are necessary to make sure those dollars are well spent. And now we've got all the ducks in a row, and we are ready to submit many more sites. So there's more work coming your direction, thank goodness. But we've been really tickled, honestly, at the overwhelmingly positive response, and thankful for the federal dollars and the part that Blink is contributing to put some EV charging stations, for example, in Ripley, West Virginia. We were able to fill a gap between the state's capital in Charleston and Parkersburg, West Virginia, along the Ohio River. And we'll have 4 Blink and 19.2 kilowatt stations plugging that gap. So we'll help reduce some range anxiety for the folks in Western West Virginia, which will be fantastic. Can't wait for those to go in. And Sarah, if you'll go to the next one. So, of course, the EV charging infrastructure growth has been very rapid. Like the slide says, most of the people live in urban areas, multifamily housing and rental housing. So one thing that's really good about the Mid-Atlantic program is that it does allow a lot of multifamily properties to add EV chargers in, and people who are driving cars for Lyft and Uber. We're very excited to be making some inroads with some utility partners, some people in DC, especially in Ward 7 and 8, we're working with Ira Dorfman there to try and get some more EV charging infrastructure in place so that rideshare can benefit from this as well. All right, Sarah, go ahead, and we'll skip past the about Blink to the next one. There you go. And Blink's charging footprint is growing at a rapid pace. We've got 5,600 plus commercial EV charging stations in 40 states. We just announced recently an acquisition in Europe as well. So we continue to expand our EV charging footprint outside of the United States. So we are really excited about that. And of course, our purchase of Blue LA for a electric car sharing service in California this past year. Another big growth for Blink as well. So Sarah, I'll let you go on. These are just some of our corporate clients that we work with. Just to give you an idea, people like Whole Foods and IKEA. We have some more that have come on board recently. So we're excited to see their enthusiasm about electric vehicle charging, and there'll be more people to come up on this slide soon. So we're excited about that. All right, Sarah. And there's a happy Blink customer right there. We'll go on to the next one. So let's start, we'll talk about the IQ 200. So something that's a little bit different about Blink that I really like is the IQ 200 charger. So we have one footprint for the charger, one piece of equipment. It works on anything from 10 amps to a 100 amp circuit with 80% output at the port. So for a prospective host who has an IQ 200, if they have this hooked up to a 240 volt circuit and they're running it on a 100 amp breaker, then that's going to pull a continuous 80 amps and it's going to provide the full 19.2 kilowatts to the vehicle connector that the J1772 connector is rated to handle. We like this approach because it's one piece of equipment. If a host now today can only provide 40 or 50 amps of power to the equipment, that's fine. That's the most that they have available. They can still benefit from the Blink IQ 200 because when they upgrade their power to 100 amps, it's just a simple phone call to our network operations center in Arizona, and we can tell that equipment is now on 100 amps of service, and it will deliver the full 19.2 kilowatts to the vehicle. And what you see in this picture is something that we're pretty excited about on the right-hand side there, where Sarah has the cursor, is a new pole mount kit that we have available. So like I said, the IQ 200 is modular. On the left, it's on our triangular pedestal. And on the right, we have a new pole mount kit. And so we've been talking to a lot of municipalities about the possibility of using these pole mount kits. And we're working with some of the utilities so that hopefully we'll be able to work through some of the power compatibility issues. But we see a lot of opportunity for these pole mount kits to bring EV charging to an even broader audience, and perhaps something that Jennifer, Newport News could benefit from, as well as communities like Portsmouth. We'd like to really build out the EV charging infrastructure in Portsmouth, which is really lacking compared to its neighbor, Norfolk, and the amount of EV charging stations. So we see this as a wonderful opportunity to increase the amount of EV charging that's available street side. So, all right, let me see here. And Sarah, let's see if we'll talk on this one a little bit. So let's talk to this slide a little bit here before we move on. I didn't know if anyone had any questions so far. We could take a few, because I'll talk all day, so.
Hey, Andy, it's Dave Gelman. A quick question for you.
Sure,
are there
Dave.
any significant changes to the unit if you wanted to say put them in for, oh, I don't know, electric school buses, for example?
That's a good question right there. No, there are none whatsoever. That's the beautiful thing about this equipment. You could plug it into a Lion or a Thomas-built electric school bus, charge it at 19.2 kilowatts. And when you're done, I could pull up in my 2018 Nissan Leaf and it would very happily charge at 6.8 kilowatts with the very same piece of equipment. But that's an excellent question. So
And
yeah,
Alan knows why I'm asking.
Are the school buses using the same connector also?
yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, J1772. Some of them may have a CCS, but as we all know, that's for DC charging, but it would still be a same J1772 connector on there. Yeah, we've worked with some last mile delivery partners. We had a test project with IKEA in Staten Island, New York, and they were using Workhorse electric vehicles provided by Fluid Truck. And those last mile deliveries in New York were all charging overnight on Blink 19.2 kilowatt IQ 200 chargers. So we've had good success with some testing that we've done with fleets, and the school buses would be no problem.
With the RFID cards, et cetera, have you guys done any fleet charging cards like the Voyager card or something like that? Or WEX?
Yes, that's a good question. So I've actually had WHS working with them. They own own and operate the Pentagon. And so we're working with them to accept the WEX card. It's not something we've done previously, but it is something that we are going to be able to do in the future. So very soon we'll be able to take WEX cards, which will be fantastic. So, and what we did for the folks at IKEA was we set them up with Blink RFID cards, as you can see in the picture. So all of those last mile delivery drivers were equipped with a Blink RFID card. It allowed them to exclusively charge at those chargers in Staten Island on their property at the distribution center. But at the same time, IKEA had them set up with accounts so that if for some reason they needed to stop and make a short charge, they could do that somewhere else. They would pay the normal rates, but they would charge on any Blink operated charger, in the country. So that was a really nice flexibility for those fleet drivers. It gave them a little less range anxiety. So that was very, very good thing for them. So, and it takes Apple Pay, Google Wallet, and all the major credit card payments. As Alan mentioned, this is networked equipment. And so the equipment has cellular modem built into it. And we use actually AT&T and T-Mobile. So we have a CDMA and a GSM carrier on board. And the nice thing about that is for an EV driver, they're connected 24/7 to Blink's Network Operations Center in Phoenix, Arizona. So this is our operations center, Blink employees. And the beautiful thing is they're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to help EV drivers, because we're going to have a lot of new EV drivers coming on board. And they're not going to pull up to a charging station and just know, like we do after years of driving one, how to plug in and get going. And that's one of the best things about this equipment, is that we have that help available in real time for those EV drivers. And if this equipment goes offline for some reason, if it doesn't communicate with our network operations center, if it misses 2 of those check-ins, which it checks in once every 2 hours, then we know the equipment is offline and we proactively reach out to the hosts. And one of the things I'm most excited about with the Mid-Atlantic Electrification Program is that Blink has included warranty coverage for all prospective hosts for the length of the agreement. So not only will we be deploying this EV infrastructure, but we're going to be making certain that it is up and running as much as we possibly can. I think we all learned from a lot of the early deployments that some of those stations would go down and they wouldn't be online, wouldn't be available. I know I've pulled up to one with 2% state of charge and been a little nervous because it was offline. So the great thing about this equipment is for our hosts, it's going to be up and running. If anything happens to it, it's going to be replaced for free under the grant program. And I, as an EV driver, will be able to find it since it's networked. And I'll be able to look on PlugShare or Google, see that that equipment is there, that it's available, and that it has 19.2 kilowatts of power. So that's really exciting to me to be able to see all that. And Sarah, if you wanted to go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about charging speed. So you can see here, just put together a quick slide. On the far left is my 2018 Nissan Leaf. You can see the charging speed, 19.2 kilowatts. I'm still limited to 7.2 with my onboard rectifier in my car. But as technology increases, you can see as we move to the right, the Mustang Mach-E is going to be able to charge at a higher speed. The Model Y, of course, the Teslas have been able to charge, and the new Cadillac Lyriq. We've been working with a lot of General Motors dealers, and they are excited to put in the Blink IQ200 because we can offer them 19.2 kilowatts of charging, which is, I'm very jealous. Their car is going to be able to charge at the full 19.2 kilowatts. Also working with a lot of Audi dealers. The Audi e-tron has an option for 22 kilowatt onboard rectifier. So they put 2 11 kilowatt rectifiers in the vehicle. And we've been working with a lot of Audi dealers so that they can also charge at 19.2 kilowatts on those vehicles as well. So very exciting stuff. So again, I'll stop and take a breath here and let you guys ask some questions because I'm in sales. So again, I'll talk all day.
Hey, it's Dave again. So for a light duty vehicle, let's say you're putting in what 20 kilowatt hours max. How much does it cost when you come up to a Blink?
Yeah, so it's a very good question. The charge is different for each state. So for example, in some states, it would be 39 cents a kilowatt for a Blink member, 49 cents a kilowatt for a guest. It can run a little bit more expensive depending on the state. In Virginia, it would be 49 cents a kilowatt for a Blink, member, 59 cents a kilowatt for a guest. It's definitely not the least expensive way to charge, but it's the convenience and the speed. And I, for one, am perfectly fine charging my car, knowing that, for example, I stayed at the Hilton right across from Reagan Airport last month. And when I was there, they have a Blink charger. I plugged in, charged my car overnight from right at 0% state of charge to 100% when I checked out the next morning. That total cost to me was around $13.50 for 40 kilowatt battery pack that's in my car. So.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, no worries at all. Very good question right there. And some states still make us charge for electricity for time based. In New Jersey, we can't charge by the kilowatt, but slowly but surely those states are coming around, and there are more people switching to kilowatt, which I think is a better way to go for
Do you
sure.
think they're going to require that? I saw the movement in California to require charging by kilowatt.
I hope so. I think it's better because really, if you think about it, it's an unfair advantage. If I've, got the means to purchase a Tesla or an Audi e-tron or a Cadillac Lyriq, um, I'm actually taking advantage of the system. I'm getting a lot of power in a very short period of time. I'm paying very little money. My little 2018 Nissan Leaf, it's taking me 3 times as long to charge. I'm going to pay 3 times as much money. So I think the per kilowatt rate, we're all for it at Blink, and anywhere where we can charge by the kilowatt, that's definitely our preference.
Yeah,
So
and
we think that's more equitable.
I was going to say what's holding that back is some jurisdictions have not passed that selling electrons through EVSE for EV recharging is not selling electricity. They haven't passed legislation that says that, so you have to be a utility to sell on a kilowatt hour basis.
In
So that's why
Virginia,
some places it's a hookup charge or a time charge.
and Virginia is all good. So in Virginia, you can charge by the kilowatt hour without being a utility. Hey, would you do you have any thoughts on measuring the exact amount of electricity? Is that a thing that you've had to deal with in California or elsewhere, to measure to be sure that it's exactly 9 kilowatts or something?
So now that's a good question right there. And it brings me to the fact that each one of the Blink, there is some loss of power, obviously in the equipment. That's true. And that's sort of where Alan is headed right there. But one thing that I do like about the Blink equipment is each one of the IQ 200 chargers, it has a utility grade meter built into it. So for our hosts, they are able to very accurately determine how much electricity the equipment is consuming each month. And through our software, which if Sarah, you could go to the next slide. Through our software in the Blink network, they're able to log in anytime they want as a host. They can see exactly how much power the equipment is consuming. In the case of the Mid-Atlantic program, these hosts are reimbursed 100% for the amount of electricity the equipment utilizes. So we're really excited about that because they're providing wonderful amenity to EV drivers, helping to push us toward clean energy. And for them, it's not costing them anything extra on their utility bills each month. So that is a wonderful benefit for the hosts. And with this network and the strength of it, we're able to report this data back so that people who are putting these federal dollars for everyone who's contributing to this project, we're able to monitor very closely, the utilization of the equipment, make sure we're putting chargers in the right place, that these chargers are getting used frequently, and that we can measure the benefit and help to demonstrate to others, what we all know in this room of how advantageous this is to go with electric. Especially with the pipeline, we've talked about that quite a bit, but it really did sort of drive home how fragile that could be. And the grid same thing could happen to the grid. We saw what happened to Texas, in the winter time there. But, I, for one, was very happy to have an EV in this particular instance. There's no doubt about that. So, and again, any questions that you have on the network itself, I'm happy to answer those as well.
Here, this is John Cartmill. Do you guys coordinate with other charging providers so that they're not like 50 of them along I-95 and none anywhere else, so that people are kind of constrained to take those roads?
And I will chime in to say we need a whole lot more than 50 on I-95. We're going to need 50. We're going to need 50 DC fast chargers. We're going to need maybe 5,000 level 2s.
Yeah, no, John, you have a great question there and a very good point. So I, for one, I just started in with Blink last fall, so being fairly new to EV charging side of things, I started looking with PlugShare, and we have some more advanced tools, but we will go with like PlugShare, for example, just as a starting point, and that's where I found Ripley, West Virginia. So I do look for spots where I live in Eastern Virginia, right on the coast. And I drove my 2018 Leaf all the way to Ripley, West Virginia, and had a great time. Met some people that had not seen EVs before in person. Was tickled to death that they were very positive, first of all, about seeing the cars there. Had a lot of questions. I like to talk, so I had a lot of answers. So it worked out really good. But that's how I found Ripley, John, was looking on PlugShare, and I've been able to locate some other communities. And so little bit by little bit, I'm trying to fill in missing links in the network, because there are a lot of people who would like to go to places, off of I-95 and be able to explore some of the beautiful scenery in West Virginia, for example. And I, myself, as an EV driver, found for one of the first times having a lot of range anxiety because being out close to Beckley, somewhere between Lewisburg, West Virginia, and the state capital in Charleston, I thought 2 times there I might run out of power because of the topography. You have such steep hills in that area that you really need EV charging stations. And I would love to see EV charging stations on the toll road there on 64, I think it is, where you could pull off in West Virginia and get a little DC fast charge or a level 2 high-speed charge from a Blink piece of equipment, because there's no chargers right now as it stands at those rest stops. So very good question, John, but we are working really hard to not put them in front of another Starbucks, but find some other places that, that really need some charging. So excellent question. Yeah, anyone else? Happy to.
Andy, I have a couple of issues. This is Andy Alden, related to like, I guess I would say human factors issues. Getting these things out there is great, and getting more of these out there are great. But at some point, we're going to have to accommodate the idea of sharing these things amongst multiple users. And how we do that. And you talked about pulling up to a hotel or whatever, plugging it in and leaving overnight. What if you only needed a certain amount of charge and there was somebody else that needed that charger also? Is there a communication? I guess one way is there something going on between your app where you can let people know that their car is charged up to now that to allow them to do the next leg of their trip, and that they can unplug so somebody else, because somebody else was waiting? Or is there, do you see a future where we might unplug our car and plug the plug into another person's car? Or and even the issue of icing, where obviously non-electric vehicles are taking up the spaces dedicated to EVs. How are you guys thinking about all those kinds of things?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Andy. And so I was just working with, before this call, a multifamily property owner in Bethesda. And one of the questions that they had is, what happens when, a resident's car is fully charged? We're only going to have 2 of these units to start off with. There are 60 units here in the building, 120 cars at least. And so what we do with the Blink app is, since it is connected 24/7 to our network, it's free to register on the Blink application on your iPhone or on your Android phone. And what I was telling this prospective host is that once that vehicle is full, it will notify the driver by either text message or email or both, depending on the preference they set, that their vehicle is fully charged. And in cases where there's limited a number of chargers and a high utilization, there is the option for an occupancy fee. So we can work with a host and set the equipment up so that there would be a fee charged if you leave a vehicle idle at a charger. So it's still connected, fully charged, doesn't need a charge anymore, then we can charge an occupancy fee. That goes back to the host of the property to help them recoup the equipment costs. And that's something that we do. Also, to our equipment, if you have, let's say, limited power, you can't dedicate 100 amps to every charger. We use local load management. So we can actually have 4 chargers where maybe there would be power typically only for 2. And if I pull up in my Leaf and 3 other people pull up, we'll share that 100 amps equally. And then as each car reaches a full state of charge, the equipment will automatically take the remaining power and distribute it to the 3, then the 2, then the single vehicle that needs to be charged. So that last vehicle is getting the full 19.2 kilowatts. So there's a lot of work we're doing on our side, on the EVSE equipment side, to make sure that the drivers have a very positive experience. What you mentioned is a very common problem. You know, it's easy to say just add more equipment, but sometimes people aren't able to do that right away due to cost. So occupancy fees are one way to encourage people to share. And when it comes to icing, I definitely, it's really gets under my skin personally, especially if I pull up with like 2% state of charge and there's a gas car plugged in, or excuse me, sitting in the spot where I should be plugged in. That really gets me, but it's up to local municipalities. We definitely encourage them to put up signage and have ordinances in place to help discourage that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, as an EVSE supplier, we're at the mercy of the local municipality to do that part.
Okay. Do you ever foresee a circumstance in the future where, you know, like I know I would be happy to let someone, if they saw all 3 of my lights on my dash were out or whatever, that my car was fully charged up, I would be happy for them to steal my connection and plug it into their car. You know, they don't have to move my car to do that because there might be an empty space next to me. You know, one charger can serve 3 spaces relatively easily. Is there anything like that out? You know, is that just too much of a risk having somebody mess with somebody else's car or mess with your car?
No, I think that's a very good question. I, for one, will hope to see some changes in our app to be like PlugShare. I use PlugShare. I don't work for them. I've talked about them a lot, but it's just I find it a very easy piece of software to use. But I'll give you a good example. I was in Williamsburg, and I know that there's a Signet DC fast charger. Alan, you'll be familiar with those little square 50 kilowatt DC fast chargers that came out when the Leaf did. And I stopped at one at a hotel and was close to low state of charge. There was a Nissan Leaf already plugged in. Those units can only charge 1 vehicle at a time. And luckily the Leaf driver had checked in on PlugShare. And so I just messaged this Leaf driver because I saw they had the 3rd light blinking. So I knew that they were close to full charge. Hey, how long are you going to be here? I've got, 10% state of charge and I need to make it, 150 miles tonight. And they messaged me right back, said, oh, I'm going to be here for 3 or 4 hours. Feel free, unplug my car, get a charge. And when you're done, just plug me back in. Messaged her back. Fantastic. Thank you. So I love that about the EV community. So yeah, she was happy to let me unplug her car. And sometimes I'll even leave a note and on top of my dash and tell people, hey, if you see all 3 lights on, feel free to unplug. And for now, I guess we have to, there's a little bit of just working with each other in the EV community to kind of help each other out. But really good questions.
Yeah,
So.
I thought about leaving the same note on my car. Yeah, so that's a great idea.
Yeah, here's your next generation technology idea, Andrew.
Oh, go ahead, David.
A self-retracting connector. When the car is done, it pulls the connector out and retracts it into the unit.
Ah, I like that. I like that. Volkswagen's got a pretty nifty charger that I saw some press about not too long ago. So I think there'll be a day where we won't even have to plug in. We'll just pull up and just like my telephone, I set it on a charging pad and it'll just charge passively, but there's a lot of loss. It's not a very efficient way to charge, but one of these days there'll be some better technology for sure. But so all very good questions.
Lines, there is a new charging module sort of thing that EV drivers can drive into. It looks like a car wash port. And you pull into it, you'd have to plug in the make and model of your car, and the machine is automatically programmed to remove the fuel cells, the dead fuel cells from your battery, replace them with charged up fuel cells, and then put you back on your way.
I've seen that, Mark. Yeah, that was some very cool technology. That company is working with some of the OE manufacturers to make a standardized like battery module so that they can be removed and replaced. And I think that's a really cool idea. There's a lot of battery technology that's coming out it's pretty amazing. So
Yeah, there was a group called Better Place that tried to do that about 15 years ago. They were just too far ahead of their time.
yeah,
And there are some companies in China that are doing that battery replacement thing now. So it's moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Studebaker of the electric vehicle crowd, right? They were too early.
That's right. Yeah,
Andrew will get that, and a couple other people will. Beyond that, I'm on my own.
that's
Too
right.
old, too old.
Oh man, I'm there with you, David. Though I got you. But any other questions? If not, I can turn it over to Alan. We can have some other EV discussion. But I do want to say that I really appreciate the time this afternoon. I'm very fortunate, I feel like, to be working at Blink. It's a new opportunity for me in my life. COVID took care of my job like it did for many Americans in this past year. And I felt really very fortunate to find myself quickly reemployed and working at Blink. And that was last August. And then the election came along, and EV interest was already very high. And it's like someone just turned the notch up on the intensity of it after the election. So I've been very happy to be where I am, and want to thank all of you for joining us today. So thank you.